I never thought my own mother would look me in the eye and tell me that my entire future was worth less than a first-class plane ticket. But here we are. Imagine sitting at the dinner table, your bags packed for the university you worked your tail off to get into, only to be told that the money for your tuition and housing just vanished because your sister needed a graduation trip to Europe to find herself. My mom looked at me with this fake, watery-eyed sympathy and said they just couldn't afford 2 tickets to success. So my sister got the dorm room and the degree, and I was expected to just stay home and work at the local grocery store to help pay for her lifestyle. It was the ultimate betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect me most. Was I wrong for what I did next? Or would you have burned every bridge behind you just like I did? I really need you to hear this whole story before you judge me, because by the end of this, I wasn't just the disappointing daughter anymore. I was the one driving the moving truck that took everything they thought they owned. To understand how we got to that point, you have to understand the dynamic in my house. My sister, Chloe, is 2 years older than me and has always been the golden child. I don't use that term lightly. If Chloe scraped her knee, it was a national tragedy. If I broke my arm, I was told to stop being dramatic and go finish my chores. My parents, Susan and Mark, always lived a bit beyond their means to make sure Chloe had the best of everything. They took out loans for her private high school, bought her a brand new car for her 16th birthday while I was told to take the bus, and constantly reminded me that someday it would be my turn. I believed them. I stayed quiet. I studied until my eyes bled. I worked a part-time job since I was 15, and I saved every penny. I got into a prestigious university 4 states away. A dream school with a heavy price tag, but one my parents had promised for years they had a specific college fund for. They told me they had been saving equally for both of us. That was the first big lie. The summer before I was supposed to leave, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Chloe had just graduated from her mid-tier college, and instead of looking for a job, she spent her days lounging by the pool and scrolling through travel influencers' feeds. One night, my mom called us into the living room. She had this nervous energy, the kind she gets right before she asks for a huge favor she has no intention of returning. She told me that due to some unforeseen financial setbacks and market fluctuations, the college fund wasn't quite what they thought it was. I felt a pit in my stomach, but I told her it was okay. I could take out more loans or work a second job. But then the hammer dropped. Mom said, "Sweetie, it's more than that. We've decided that Chloe needs a gap year to recover from the stress of her finals. We used the remaining savings, your tuition money, to buy her a luxury tour of Europe and a year-long lease on a high-end apartment in the city so she can network properly. We just couldn't afford 2 tickets to a big future right now, and Chloe is older, so it's her turn. First, you can stay here, keep your job at the deli, and maybe in 4 or 5 years, we can talk about your school." I sat there in stunned silence while Chloe gushed about how supportive our parents were. They didn't even look ashamed. They genuinely expected me to sacrifice my entire career trajectory so Chloe could take selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower. When I tried to protest, my dad just shrugged and said, "Family means sacrifice, Maya. Don't be selfish." That word, selfish, hit me like a physical blow. I had spent years being the easy child, the one who didn't ask for anything, and now I was being told that wanting the education I was promised was an act of greed. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just walked upstairs, closed my door, and started looking at the legal documents I had tucked away in my desk for a rainy day. See, There was one thing my parents had forgotten in their rush to fund Chloe's European fantasy: my grandmother. My Nana passed away 3 years ago, and she was the only person who truly saw me. She knew exactly how my parents were, and she had left me something they didn't know about. She had left me the deed to the small house we were currently living in. My parents thought they inherited it, but Nana had actually put it in a life estate for them, with me as the sole remainderman. The condition was simple. The house stayed in their names as long as they paid the property taxes and kept the place maintained. If they failed to do so, or if they tried to leverage the house for personal loans without my consent, the title would immediately revert to me. I had been keeping an eye on the mail for months, and I knew they had fallen behind on the taxes because they were too busy buying Chloe's designer luggage. I also knew they had recently tried to take out a second mortgage to pay for Chloe's city apartment. They had violated the terms of the trust, and the house was legally mine. So that's the situation I was in. I was being told to give up my life for a sister who wouldn't even share her fries with me, while my parents were living in a house that technically belonged to me. I had to make a choice. Do I roll over and let them ruin my life, or do I take back what's mine and leave them with nothing? Before I tell you what happened when the lawyers got involved and the moving truck arrived, I want you to pause right now. Go down to the comments and tell me, would you have let your parents stay in the house out of loyalty, or would you have evicted them to pay for the education they stole from you? I really want to know if I'm the villain here or just a survivor. I gave them 1 week to change their minds. I sat them down and told them I was willing to forget the Europe trip if they just gave me the tuition money that was rightfully mine. My mom laughed. She actually laughed and told me I was being adorable, and that I should focus on making more tips at the deli. That was the final straw. I called the lawyer Nana had set me up with. Within 48 hours, the paperwork was filed. Since they had defaulted on the taxes and attempted to secure a loan against an asset they didn't fully own, the life estate was terminated. I was the legal owner of the property, effective immediately, and since they had been so adamant that they couldn't afford things, I decided to help them cut their expenses. I walked into the kitchen on a Tuesday morning with a stack of legal notices. I laid them on the table next to Chloe's travel itinerary. My dad looked at them, then at me, his face turning a shade of purple I'd never seen before. I told them very calmly that they had 30 days to vacate the premises. I told them that since I couldn't afford to go to college while paying for their housing, I was selling the house to a developer to fund my entire 4-year degree, room and board, and a nice little cushion for grad school. Chloe started screaming that I was ruining her life, and my mom tried to slap me, but I just held up my phone and reminded her that I had cameras installed the day before. The betrayal in their eyes was nothing compared to the betrayal I had felt at that dinner table. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of drama. They tried to sue me, but the trust was airtight. They tried to turn the rest of the family against me, but when I showed my aunts and uncles the proof that my parents had spent my entire college fund on a vacation for Chloe, the support for them evaporated. Even my grandparents on my dad's side told him he was on his own. Chloe's trip was canceled because the travel agency wouldn't refund the non-refundable tickets my mom had bought with my money, and without a house to use as collateral, their credit cards were maxed out. They were stuck. On the final day, I hired a moving crew, not for them, for me. I had sold the house to a local family who wanted to move in quickly, and they paid a premium for a fast closing. I watched as the moving truck backed into the driveway. My parents were packing their things into a beat-up U-Haul they could barely afford to rent. My mom was crying, saying they'd have to move into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. Chloe was sitting on the curb, her designer suitcases looking ridiculous in the dirt, crying because she had to get a job at the same grocery store where I used to work. I walked up to the moving truck, the one I had hired to take my belongings to my new dorm, and I looked at my dad. He asked me how I could do this to my own flesh and blood. I just looked at him and said, "You told me you couldn't afford 2 tickets, Dad." I just decided to make sure I was the one holding the only ticket left. I got into my car, the one I had paid for with my own savings, and I drove away. I didn't look back in the rear-view mirror once. Now, I'm sitting in my dorm room at my dream university. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and for the first time in my life, I don't feel like an afterthought. My parents haven't spoken to me in months, and honestly, it's the best gift they've ever given me. Chloe is apparently struggling to make rent, and my mom keeps sending me guilt trip texts that I immediately delete. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't make you family, loyalty and respect do. If you don't have those, you're just people who share a DNA sequence and a lot of resentment. I chose myself, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. That's the end of my story, but I'm curious to see what you guys think. Did I go too far by evicting them, or did they get exactly what they deserved for trying to steal my future? Like this video if you think I made the right call and was right to stand my ground. Make sure to subscribe for more stories about people finally getting their revenge on toxic family members. Also, drop a comment below and share your final thoughts on this whole mess. I'll be reading through them to see if anyone has ever dealt with a golden child, sibling like Chloe. I'll see you all in the next story.